The VHF radio is an incredible, wonderful, amazingly useful piece of safety gear that unfortunately a bunch of people don't seem to know how to use. But with just a few little tips, you'll be using the VHF like a pro. Hi, I'm Nico Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. Today I'm sharing 6 do's and 1 don't about using your VHF radio. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Teak Guard. Looking to refinish your boat's teak with a minimum of mess and fuss? Look no further. Teak Guard's non-toxic, water-based formulas for cleaning and finish will turn your teak from dingy to sparkling in no time. Use coupon code BG20 for 15% off of your order of $50 or more. Visit allguardproducts.com. Admire your teak with less maintenance. Be like Robert Vila from Rico, Georgia, who says, "You're right, it's the best product for teak on the market." Once you're done with your teak, you might be looking at your radio. And yes, the VHF radio is an incredibly important, powerful tool. It's really amazing, though, as we've been cruising both in the Eastern Caribbean and the Bahamas and up and down the East Coast the last couple of years, we've been very surprised to see how few boaters seem to be using the VHF radio. People post on Facebook, or they'll talk about how important their cell phone is. And then when they do use the VHF radio, they don't use it right, and then they don't get a response, which makes them feel like the VHF is an outdated, useless piece of gear that they don't use, and the cycle just continues. There are a few things that can feel intimidating about it, and there certainly are just a few tips that make using the VHF both more practical, but also more likely to get you a response. So without any further ado, there are 6 do's and then 1 don't. So do turn it on. Do turn it on channel 16 or dual watch whatever channel is the local hailing one along with 16 and turn it up so you can hear it. This is actually critical, as in, yes, non-negotiable critical to do whenever you're moving the boat. But leaving it on at anchor, that's more of a choice. Highly advised, though, especially if you're in a remote area or concerning weather is approaching. So number 1, turn it on and turn it up so you can hear it. Here's the story behind this one. We were sailing in the Chesapeake Bay and watching on our AIS as this big ship was approaching in the channel, and there was a sailboat. We could also see on AIS. They were blithely sailing right in the middle of the channel, and the ship was trying to hail the sailboat, who was not responding at all. Clearly, they didn't have their VHF on, or they didn't have it turned up loud enough so they could hear it. Turn it on, turn it up. The second do is to change the channel after making contact. Channel 16 is for hailing in distress only. Once you've connected with a boat that you want to talk to, you need to shift to a working channel so you don't clog up channel 16. Key is to know what channels are good to use in the area where you are. For example, in much of the United States, bridges monitor 13, and so does commercial traffic. Chit-chatting on channel 13 will not endear you to anyone at all. And don't forget to switch back to 16 when you've finished your traffic. The third do, identify yourself and your location as precisely as possible when you're hailing another boat. This is the northbound vessel Mischief at mile marker 125 calling the southbound trawler approaching buoy 24. AIS is super helpful because then you can call the boat by name. But if you don't have the boat's name, absolutely being specific about location is critical. I can't tell you how many times in the ICW this past fall, not that we heard that much, but the number of people who would call things like northbound sailboat calling the southbound vessel. Seriously, we heard that more than once. No wonder you're not going to get a response. Do you know how many northbound sailboats and how many southbound vessels there are? No idea where this person was. VHF is line of sight, which means you could be hearing people from 5 or 7 miles away. Which leads me to do number 4, which is to remember that VHF is line of sight radio. This means that you probably can't talk to a boat who's on the other side of a mountain It also means that your transmission is not only going to boats within a 100-yard radius. The fifth thing is to respond when hailed. Commercial traffic, Coast Guard, pleasure vessel, if someone is calling you, or if you think they're calling you, if you're in the area that's identified, respond as quickly and as clearly as you can. Be courteous. If you missed hearing who it was calling, a response might be something like, "This is mischief back to the vessel calling." Because if somebody's calling you, it's because they need something. It might be a commercial vessel letting you know that you're in their way. It might be a Coast Guard vessel needing assistance from you. It might be a friend who you haven't seen in a long time. Answer the radio. And the last do is to practice using it ahead of time. Things like keying the mic a second or two before speaking, keeping it keyed for a beat after you're finished, understanding how close to your mouth to hold the microphone, how to change the channel after you've established connection with the other boat that you want to talk to. Practice makes better and makes you feel more like you can use that VHF appropriately. And the last big one is a don't. Do not play Radio Cop. It's not your job to police others and their radio usage. Don't be the snarky, overbearing know-it-all who jumps in on 16 to correct a supposed infraction. Remember, 16 is for hailing and distress only, not for, "Hey, I know how to use the radio and you don't, and you're an idiot for being on 16. Don't do that. That's it. Nothing else from me today. But I will say that if you don't know how to use your VHF or you're a little worried about it, the Boat Galley's John Herlig has an amazingly useful course filled with all kinds of tips to help reduce your anxiety about picking up that microphone. There's a link in the show notes. Check it out. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you, and the radio's going to be on in the background. Maybe turn down a little bit so we can have a nice conversation and toast to our incredible good fortune at being able to live this amazing lifestyle. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love it when we hear from our listeners. We love it when you let us know that we have indeed helped you make boat life just a tiny little bit better. I hope you have the most spectacular week.